As part of LFA 2023, we unveiled a series of new benches in the Royal Docks as part of the Pews and Perches design competition with the Royal Docks team. Now in its fourth edition, this series of benches aims to improve London's public realm, celebrate emerging architectural talent, and connect people with the buildings and spaces around them. We caught up with each of the winning designers to find out the stories behind the benches. Here, Akmaral tells us about her bench, Together We Hold.
My name is Akmaral. I'm originally from Kazakhstan and I have lived in the UK for almost 10 years now. And currently I'm a London-based architectural designer. My bench is called Together We Hold. During the making of the bench, I have been reflecting on the concept a lot. I believe that the topic is not something that can be taken easily. The competition deadline was at the end of 2022, and I remember there was a lot going on in the world at the time and still going on. Just to highlight some of the big issues, it was mass protests in Iran against women's dress code violations and a very scary, terrible war in Ukraine. And I personally have friends who used to live there and told me stories about women who were left alone, always childcare in houses without heat and electricity. And spanning all the way to the US, where kind of the abortion rights issue, which is a basic human right issue, happened in June 2022. And with all that being said, there is the other side where people were creating safe space for women together. And whether it's Women Only Cafe in Iran, where women don't have to obey the dress code, or I saw Ukrainian women standing together on the Trafalgar Square in London, singing, just comforting each other and creating that comforting, safe space. And I find that very inspiring that standing together, we can build a safe space for women and make it one of the priorities, because at the moment it's not. The bench was hugely informed by standing together, holding things together and moving forward and trying to fight for our rights. The design intention was that there are four women figures holding the bench up, and although the shapes are kind of flowy, curvy, and it looks very joyful, it almost, if you look closely to the bench, it looks like the top is very heavy. And you can see that the figures are trying to carry the weight of the top of the bench with all parts of their body, no matter if it's back or a face or a hand. And the figures look almost uncomfortable that they're holding the bench together. As for materials and the whole structure, I was very wrong in the beginning when I was applying for the competition with my submission. I thought there would be one piece welded together from steel, and I thought that the entire part would not need any structural elements, which was very silly of me. But within the process, and considering that we have the budget and the fabricators' sketches, the materials have changed. Initially, I was using steel only, so the shapes and everything looks very light and almost thin, like one piece. But eventually it ended up being a plywood cladding around the bench and the steel frame on the inside to hold the bench together. With the plywood, because it has a certain thickness to it, we managed to integrate an etching line where the shape's cutting through. And that's why you can see that kind of in-depth and the shapes almost pop out from the bench. It's very inspiring once you do certain projects and once you commit yourself to something. The amount of support that you would get from people around you. I was desperate to find a fabricator, and not many fabricators were willing to work with me because I'm kind of young and probably not very professional. But I asked my colleague if she knows anyone, and she referred me to her previous manager. I reached out to the manager, and then her previous manager referred me to the fabricator. So that's how I found my fabricator. From the visual perspective, when the LFA reached out and said that the bench will be installed in Lyle Park, I was very happy because I was designing it for this location and I love London parks. And I think colourful objects look very good surrounded by the greenery. I think this bench is kind of a bit odd because it's so colourful and so curvy. I think it's always fun to have something odd and out of the place, especially in the park. I would love to see kids interacting with it, pedestrian interacting with it as well. I hope the bench will bring joy to people in the first place. That's the most important thing, I think. With its flowing shapes and colors, I'm a big believer in colors and curves in everyday design, that they can make us feel better physically and mentally. It looks one thing, but then if you look closer to it, it looks like completely another thing, and just open to interpretation really for pedestrians and people passing by. We Hold Together Bench is hugely informed by my practice, which is, I called it side gig, both conceptually and visually, as I create prints on the side to my full-time job. The first print I created in 2020 was during my master's thesis at the architecture school, where I investigated hidden homelessness amongst women in the UK and the lack of access to menstrual hygiene and sanitation. And the first print was a diagrammatic zoning plan, which looked like a figurative shape to women. And I was exploring a soft transition between spaces for my project. And the print just ended up being there in this kind of feminine flowing shapes with lots of colors in it. What I'm exploring today through my prints is our body's rights, the softness associated with the feminine forms, and kind of trying to understand how to live joyfully within our bodies, no matter what they look like and no matter what we think they should look like. Prints, I've been doing it for 3 years, and I've always wanted to do a physical object, which is why I think as a whole, like the London Festival of Architecture provides a phenomenal opportunity for young professionals to showcase their talent and share their thoughts and concerns. I believe there is a substantial lack of support for young creatives in general, and I think we need more competitions like this.
If you've enjoyed this conversation and would like to listen to more like this, search for Building Sounds on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favourite podcast.